an example of this in Australia. I think they had a lot of guns like the United States did, and they
Hmm.
made a law to make it much more strict, I believe. You'd have to look into it.
I think
But
they're basically totally outlawed in Australia since like the mid 1990s.
yeah. And
Um,
and I believe that's how it happened in Europe, broadly as well. I mean, it's interesting you brought up when there was no police force. I know uh, Bismarck in 1871, around that time, the late 19th century was when, before then you really didn't have a, a you didn't have police everywhere. You didn't have um, so, social programs. The state didn't really take care of people. You had,
mhm,
villages and the church and that kind of thing.
right.
So people had guns, but at some point those guns were taken away. And I imagine it was through, after the world wars when they, de-escalated everything and then everybody had to give up their guns. I would imagine that's it. And that's just never happened in the States. You had the Civil War, but after that, it was still the Wild West. So people needed
Yeah,
guns.
yeah,
That's
it
interesting.
was.
There's a good article by Sam Harris, the making of the gun or the something of the gun, and that totally changed my opinion. And he argues that most, or I believe it's just a fact, most deaths are not caused by automatic weapons, but by
Pistols.
pistols. Yeah, and he said there's just simply too
Hmm.
many guns in the states to make a law where people would have to, you know, give them back, like to make a state like in a, a state of affairs like it is here in Germany and most European countries. So, that was very convincing. But I just think, you know, to start with, like you say, um, just a 2 hour um, uh, instruction workshop on how do you make sure people know how to use the gun, make sure they understand that it can kill people, and you know, simple things like don't leave it around, and when you have it, or keep the ammunition outside of it, and
Right.
or ask them, what are you going to use it for? Do you have a farm? If so, you might want to use it this way. Just rational things like that. I
Well,
think that would go a
Switzerland has a
long way.
lot of like ways to
Uh,
mold a
they have a lot of
culture.
guns, yeah.
They do. And that's
Exactly.
what I was thinking. I don't know 100% sure, but when I saw the images that were posted by some of my family members that are more conservative, where they showed high school kids practicing how to use firearms in high school at a public school, one, you'll have guns in high school to protect yourself from an active shooter. And two, people will learn. And that will be a way to combat the irresponsible behaviors in gun culture. I think it would be good for a teacher to say, yeah, why are you going to buy a gun with a Hello Kitty? That's not the graphics you need on a gun. It's a tool. It's built for respect. Because I went over there to that gun, the area where that shopping center was, and I was just seeing so many guns with to look cool and market them, and I was like, yeah, it just turned my stomach because that wasn't to
Mm.
me a good way to encourage responsible gun culture.
Mm.
That's what I'm about. And if you were to teach kids at an early age, maybe you will take that mentality of that identity and seeing it more
Mm.
as a tool and how it's meant to be used and respected. And I just think
Mm.
there's too many people that don't respect and don't use guns responsibly. And they also use it for crime too. Like there's higher usages of Right. pistols. And I mean,
Mm.
every time a person on the right goes, well, you do know what's the most problematic weapon. I'm like, yeah, it's a pistol and it's
Mm.
used in poor areas. I know this.
Yeah.
But Right. let's go ahead and talk about the other issues. I mean, that's just not an isolated area where I mean, the United States has a lot of issues with guns. So I think we could attack the culture. And I don't really know other than just fight. I mean, there's a whole different conversation to have with the poverty aspect of it.
Mm.
Hmm.
That's I mean, I can say I learned something in in this conversation because I mean, we often just make fun of these, news stories that we hear, like a congressman is trying to get, gun workshops or gun training in schools, in high schools. And it's like, what are you guys doing? What are you guys training everybody to use guns for? I mean, are you preparing for a war or what's going on? whereas you can, I can kind of get the fact now that you guys just live in a society. I've forgotten about it, but that's how it was in Colorado as well. When I think back, there's guns everywhere there,
Mhm.
and you just know that, and you see them. Here, there's just no guns. I never see any gun unless it's on a policeman, and so they're two different societies, and it may very well be a good argument that you should train. That should be something that all high school
It's called like
people have.
marksmanship classes,
Yeah,
marksmanship.
or market them as marksmanship classes,
That's
exactly.
what they were
That
called.
may very well be a very good idea. Yeah. Interesting.
I'm
Nice.
assuming they might do something similar in Switzerland because they do promote responsible gun
Yeah,
culture at an early age. I'm not 100% sure, but
that
that'd
would
be
be a good model, I think. Yeah. Hmm.
because everybody
Yeah,
wants to
and
be a Rambo here. That's just the
yeah,
vibe I get with some of those gun shops. I'm just like, dude.
yeah, but in general, to bring it back, I think this is something. I mean, a reason why these kinds of conversations are very good. I would love to hear our politicians talking like this, because I think that they could come in a rational conversation to some kind of agreement that, how how many hours of workshops do we need for people when they buy a gun, and just get at least a 1 hour workshop to start
Mm,
out, and
right.
maybe pay for it by taxes from the NRA or something like that, and start there and get something, at the federal level to be implemented, and that everybody could be behind, just because it really is smarter, um,
Right.
and a lot of things, you see this like in addiction and that kind of thing, that people have habits like maybe drinking. They started to drink in high school because it was very cool, and if you didn't drink, you weren't cool. Whereas later, you're still drinking a lot, but it's not cool anymore. You're just, kind of ruining your life, and so you need to realize that. And this whole thing about the, James, what you said, that there's this Western Wild West culture that people have in their minds. Yeah, in some places where Emiliano lives, maybe it's still true. You have a farm and you have, you know, um, the cougars that wander around. That's still the Wild West, but in most places it's not. And just to reassess the situation and make new laws. And just to kind of segue, I mean, that's one reason why I really think if America could, I think it's almost impossible, write a new constitution, that they could write laws that fit the 21st century instead of the 18th.
Right.
That's what the founders allowed for. It's an elastic
But
document.
Yeah, that's the
yeah,
thing. Like
it
a
should.
ground up rewriting is would not go unless the United States fully collapsed, basically. Which maybe it will in 10 years if we keep going down this road. But especially because it is designed to be updated inherently. Um, but
Mhm.
I think the other thing for the United States is we need to go back a little bit to the original idea, was that people in different places are going to have different needs and values, and we need to take the governance down to the smallest
Like
possible
what
common
kind of different
denominator.
needs and what kind of different values in the
Well,
country
rural
in our
versus city, like you said, just as the quickest, broadest example, the needs that you have for firearms on a farm is totally different than the needs you have in a city that has like almost no crime rate versus in a city that does, you
Mhm.
know. And so the people in those places should be able to get back to that. So what I'm getting at is I think states need to develop the right solution for their own states that they work out internally. And we need to stop. We've basically kind of almost gone back to giving the federal government, we're expecting it at this point to almost act like a monarchy. you know I think
well,
you've
when you
probably
mentioned
seen.
the rural needs and the city needs, the issue is people from the city are coming to the rural area and they don't have the same mindset with firearms as people from the country do.
Well, there's a time of adjustment. You telling me they never normalize?
Well, I mean, I gave you some specific examples that were
Right,
kind of
but
crazy.
they do that all day, every day for the rest of their lives while they're there,
I
or
don't
do
live
they
there
shoot?
anymore, and I
Yeah.
have some buddies that live in. Oh, right now, the rural areas that I'm from, they're already turning into, little towns now. They're not as rural as they were before because more
Mhm.
people are moving there, and now
Right.
their needs are with inflation because all the people from out of state are coming over here. So the problem's gotten to a different kind of issue now. So
Right.
it's
So,
and
But
it,
well,
but but just a clarification, so I understand what you mean,
sure.
Emiliano. People are coming from like the East Coast to Texas, or
Well,
where are they
okay,
coming from?
let me go
Or
ahead
like
and
Joe
yeah.
Rogan from California, or
Well, what's
and
happening
and
is
and and what are they doing? Are they saying, "Oh, I can get a gun very easily now. I'll just buy one," and they start to shoot it? Or I mean, I would expect like somebody from Germany who went to Texas. I mean, they would probably immediately try to make laws so that so that people
I'll give you a good
um,
example. You know who Ted
have
Nugent
have
is?
to get a license.
Do you know who Ted Nugent is?
I do.
Ted
Oh,
Ted
anyways,
Ted
Ted Nugent, he's a rock
Nugent.
star. Yeah, Nugent.
Of course, I know who Ted
So,
Nugent is.
anyways, he has
Rock
he has
on,
a lot
Emilio.
of land in Texas. And if I were to
Okay.
tell you what he does, you might be like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy." Well, he gets on helicopters and he has machine guns and he shoots wild pigs. And you're just like, and that's
I've heard
the
of this.
epitome of American gun culture. But he really is doing something good because he's controlling the population of wild boars, wild pigs that do damage to a lot of the fields. They uproot the area and all that. So there's actually a reason for that. But if
Hmm.
you have somebody from New York or from California moving to Texas, they're like, "Oh, cool." They're not going to have the same gun mentality that Ted Nugent has. He knows what he's doing.
Hmm.
He's respectful with his firearms. Do I agree with his politics? No, but I know that he is somebody I would trust with my life if I had to be around guns, you know.
Hmm.
But that kind of mentality, he's probably guilty for unintentionally pushing that culture, but he's living his life and doing what needs to be done in his area. He has a lot of land, and the boars will probably do damage to, if you let them populate the whole area, to the whole rural community he lives in.
Hmm.
But it does serve a purpose, and hunters know how to control the deer population and all that. So there's a lot of fundamental knowledge and respect with Mother Nature and the firearms that come along with that. But
Hmm.
people that are moving from Texas, moving from other states who enjoy the lower cost of living in Texas because we were a rural area. Well, we have a lot of rural areas. We have a lot of metropolitan areas too. We're huge. But they're selling their resources from California, from New
Hmm.
York, and they're able to buy land, houses, and it just increases the cost of living for us and inflates the housing market. The
Hmm.
person that bought our last home was from New York. So that's the economic issues we're having right now by having people moving into Texas because they're being lured by our Republican politicians too.
Hmm.
So
Right.
that
But eventually over time, you get enough of those people over there. Most of them are going to want to change the laws, like Edward was saying.
that's
Um,
possible.
it's going to end up skewing more blue, or whatever blue and red article was, that purple or something.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's possible actually.
Yeah. But on that point, I mean, I think that the whole red blue thing, the whole right left thing, it's making less and less sense. I mean,
Well, I
uh,
didn't
I,
mention any of the colors. I was just telling you people selling their assets and they're inflating the
yeah, yeah,
economy.
but like James, you started out saying, okay, this is the way in which I'm on the right, and this is the way in which I'm on the left, and I can name things like that, like I'm for the great books, that's on the right. I'm for national health care, that's on the left. But I mean, what does that mean? And what it does is it stops people from uniting on these issues. And I mean, that's why I think the most effective way to make a change is to just rally against this dichotomy of left right. I mean just in the States, or sorry,
Yeah.
in Germany, there are basically parallel parties to the Democrats and the Republicans. There's the SPD for the Democrats and the CDU for the
Hmm.
Republicans, but the CDU is left of the Democrats. here. I mean, so you have the Democrats and the Republicans that are further right on most issues, especially like, making wars, funding wars, no national health care or little, what have we seen from the Democrats so far, and on minimum wage and, that kind of thing. And so,
Yes.
here you have those two parties, which are, you know, um, where they are there on that scale. And then you have like five others that are not left or right. So you can like join the Green Party, and they're going to fight for bikes in the city, and or you can join the Pirates, and they're just going to rebel and cause conversations that other people wouldn't talk about. They're kind of this chaotic party, that kind of thing. And then you have like Die Linke, which is very far left, and then you have the FPD, which is more for business and that kind of thing. So you have all these choices, that are, and if 5% get in, then they're in the 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 Bundestag, and they get into the conversations and that kind of thing. And that's something that both parties fight to not have in the States. And that I just say that has to be broken so that people and politicians can have these kinds of conversations, because you can't you can't even imagine, like, AOC, which I don't even consider on the left, talking with, what's her name, Marjorie Green Taylor.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
Can you imagine them having a conversation, or with Ted Cruz? I mean, you just can't. I mean, a conversation that makes sense, like this one, like
Right.
joining like, can you imagine Ted Cruz and AOC popping up here and having a conversation?
Ted Cruz gets voted for by a lot of people, so it's just not Ted
I
Cruz.
think
it's
that-
his
What's going
constituency.
on there?
That's what I want to talk to people and ask.
I think if they ever do have conversations like this, it's behind closed doors. And everything else that we see, they, for some reason, both parties seem to have decided that the best way to secure whatever power they're trying to secure is just to pretend that the other side is completely evil and everything they do is wrong. And that's what's tearing us up right now. Getting back kind of like to what you're talking about, Edward, and I want to take it all the way to ideally get rid of parties altogether, because
exactly,
there's so much reliance on the label that people don't think about what's being said, and they're not reviewing policy decisions critically. There are
exactly
potential legislation critically, and our leaders are not actually trying to be in good with what the voters need. They're first a check against what the party wants to accomplish.
Right.
So that's actually
and
what I would like.
And I expect also that there's a lot of inside trading going on.
100%.
I mean, that has
Absolutely.
to be investigated. That's horrible, because that means that they bullshit and gaslight us, and then they meet, like you say, behind closed doors and find out, okay, what's the best way to make money. And of course they're going to provide some bills that are generally what the Democrats want and stuff, but they aren't fighting for what the voters want.
No.
That's obvious.
Well, I can probably just say politics to me is based on rhetoric and momentum. That's what I've always tweeted. And it's ultimately up to people to get more engaged, because if you look at more local level leadership politics, people are just not voting in city elections as much as they should. Same thing with state ran elections, as they should. When you have somebody that's complaining about AOC and they live like in a southern state, I'm like, she doesn't represent you, bro. It's like, what's she going to do to help you? Who's your leader? In our HOA, our homeowners association, you know how many people get involved? Not many. So it's just like, we could blame politicians, but it's ultimately our fault, because here we are, we're talking about this, and that's one of the topics that's on this agenda. with making a good argument in the toxic internet culture. People would rather just be like tossing mud instead of talking to each other, and nothing gets resolved. I mean, because we can't, as people, get involved in the politics. And I have a question, this because you guys are saying all this is a failed system and all that. These are questions that I ask. Should every state have at least 2 senators? I mean, a state that doesn't have a lot of population, that doesn't bring that much revenue for our country compared to California. Do you think they should have an equal say? I'm just curious.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry, Edward, did you want to go ahead?
No, I don't have a large part. I'm just saying would be a reason to rewrite the Constitution.
So the idea with our Senate and our House of Representatives is to equalize the say, in terms of you're gonna have for senators, yes, but in the House you have a number of representatives that is population based, and that's where you get weighted legislative say.
Do you think that say should
That's why it goes through
dictate?
the House before it goes to the Senate.
Yeah, but a lot of popular legislation is getting destroyed at the Senate too. So that's what I'm saying. That's an area that kind of bothers me, because there's some bipartisanship sometimes in the Congress, because they get voted out. They have to do something, and they get to
Mhm.
stay longer in the Senate. So they're like, man, we could. It's just like a system. It's systematic issues that I don't think people actually talk about because they're not engaged.
I
You
don't
know?
actually think the problem is the structure, meaning the number of representatives.
Hmm.
I think it's the people themselves, meaning the actual senators and the actual House of Representatives. Each of those representatives, they're just not working for us, period. You know, if I could suddenly get one message out to every single American that I would wish them to internalize more than anything else right now, is no incumbents in any office at next election, period. Not one single one should stay.
I think people in power already probably have a line of people that are on a list that they
I
can
don't
replace
care.
the next person.
But knowing that they could be actually get fired, knowing that that the American people are actually
They
tired of
become
it,
a lobbyist after that.
it would force
they'll
them
be
to
sad.
adjust.
They do what they're
No.
supposed to do. Their time in office. They
I
get
like that rule, yeah, James.
If you
It's nice.
if you did enough of them, their power is based on being able to be there for so long and figure out every nook and cranny of the system to milk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, when I say, vote third party, what I mean is vote for somebody who you think will do what you want, and then you're probably not going to vote for them again because they're going to get in there. They can't change much, and you're going to be so critical of them that they're going to get voted out the next time, and then you get somebody who has, better, fresher ideas the next time. So I'm not saying, vote for somebody and then root for them. He or she is my person, but vote for them and then be very critical of them so that they leave, and then you get somebody else in there. Basically, I don't see why, or let's just say I believe it's stupidity to vote for somebody and then cheer for them. You should vote for somebody, they're already being paid, and then be critical of them and say, get done everything that I voted for you for.
Right.
But this cheering, this flag waving of people who are making money on us. They're our
Mhm.
employees, basically. I mean, Biden,
Right.
Trump were our employees. They were horrible employees.
Mhm.
Yep.
I mean,
Just,
one of the things I can say that Biden is getting held accountable by people that are liberals and conservatives and everyone. He's the lowest polling president.
Well,
People
to
that
be
are
fair,
more. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but to be fair, I actually give Biden some slack that I don't give others, because I actually don't think it's him.
No,
I
no,
don't think
I'm not
he's
going to bash
mentally
Biden, but I'm just saying people
capable of
will
it,
hold.
you know?
yeah,
If you're more left leaning,
exactly.
you will flush crap down the toilet. But if you're right, you tend to be more of an ideologue. Trump's followers are still very loyal. So a turd, they'll just pick up a spoon and eat it. There's a difference. And it's
Well,
very, I mean, you
That
can
happens on the left too, dude.
Yeah,
give me an
It
example.
really does.
Well,
Who?
Who?
Yeah,
Yes.
All
it
of them.
depends. Yeah, it
Nah,
depends what you mean by
Andrew.
turd. I mean,
Yeah,
who?
you,
I can't think of anybody who is in politics in the States who I would hire.
no,
Nobody.
yeah.
Yeah.
But there, I don't even
They're
think there's
corrupt. I
like
mean,
a person that's on the left that's going to be like immortalized right now. I mean, I don't think it.
AOC is going to be immortalized.
oh,
She,
she
yeah,
is.
what's her
She
poll
talks
numbers?
like
Because
she talks like the
I'm gonna look
dumbest
up her poll
cheerleader.
numbers.
She talks like the dumbest cheerleaders in my high school.
Yeah,
Really,
no, yeah. I'm not gonna
she
say.
cannot be making our laws. It's
She
just
is, yeah, but she is a golden girl of the left,
Yeah, and
of the
it's interesting to
Democrat
hear you
Party.
say that because I don't really hear a lot of that kind of rhetoric. But being from California, I bet you they probably forced her down your throat.
I mean,
but
her and maybe,
I mean,
let's see,
well,
they,
here's, go ahead.
I'm sorry, what was that? The governor of New York, what was his name? He did some stuff that overtly got people killed
Yeah.
during the pandemic.
AOC
And
doesn't poll very
Cuomo?
favorably.
Cuomo, yeah.
Mm.
Cuomo made some decisions during the pandemic that got a lot of people killed. Like this is knowledge, but the entire left they completely glossed
Cuomo
over it.
got canned.
Yeah, because of sexual harassment
Yeah.
later, after an election cycle had
Trump
completed.
doesn't have like sexual harassment accusations, and they still love him, man. And AOC is not very
No,
looked
my
at
only
very
point is
favorably
that it
according to
happens
the
on both
data.
sides. Like it's just as much on both sides.
No,
Yeah, I mean, what I see here is that the metaphor of American politics has become all-star wrestling. It's just
Yeah.
and I mean, have you seen the videos? Trump was an all-star wrestler.
no.
I mean, he was in the ring. He for this all-star wrestling, billionaire versus billionaire, and he won, and he shaved off the guy's head. I mean, it was. I mean, and you see, that's how he conducts um, his politics as well, and because it fits the metaphor, he's the best for that, and
Yeah.
he wins the debates because it's an all-star wrestling debate. People want to see people punching each other, and they're fake punches. I mean, you can find pictures of the Clintons and Trump partying together. You know,
Pelosi and Trump
and I mean,
together too.
when I first saw Trump, I was like, this guy is gonna take down the system, because I remember he was on the stage with like 9 other Republicans, and the question to him was, Mr. Trump, you have given a lot of your money to Democrats. Could you please explain that? And he said, why, yes, I can explain that. I give money to many politicians because it makes them do what I want. And I think I've given money to everybody standing on the stage. And I was like, that's what we need. That's exactly what we need. But
Yeah,
then
I was entertaining Trump too in the Republican primaries as well.
but then he gets in and he's a corrupt person, so he just enjoys the corruption. But and something I don't understand is like, why Rogan, who has all this power, will not interview Trump. Why don't we have sensible people like us, like Rogan, talking to politicians? Why won't AOC, come on the Jimmy Dore show? I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what needs to happen, is that they need to be on podcast circuits constantly.
Right.
And anybody who can't have a long form conversation
Mm-hmm.
with numerous people
It's a
who
red flag.
really don't like them,
Right.
they shouldn't they shouldn't be elected. I
Well, I
mean,
would
there should be a
say
majority who don't elect them because
I
they don't
can't
do
say I
it.
disagree with that.
I agree with that, Edward, too. But I would say like Trump probably just flat out thinks he's above it. And
Hmm.
AOC probably in her heart of hearts knows she can't have a candid conversation that goes public that lasts more than 5 or 10 minutes
Yeah.
without
Exactly.
like she will tremendously eat
Yeah,
her
well,
own
the
foot.
Trump can't either. I mean, I don't see why
Yeah, but I
Rogan,
think his
with all his
motivation for
power,
not doing it is different. I think he just thinks he's too good for it.